I'm standing on my front lawn at 3 in the morning, watching everything I've worked for turn into smoke. 6 years of savings, 6 years of sacrifice, 6 years of saying, not yet, and we're almost there, and just one more year. All of it glowing orange against the night sky. My daughter is screaming in my arms, my neighbor is calling 911 for the second time, and my wife is walking out of our burning house holding a wooden box the size of a shoebox. Not the laptops, not the safe with our passports and emergency cash, not the jewelry, not a single thing with a price tag. A wooden box. And what was inside that box would eventually change the way I see everything. My marriage, my family, my entire definition of what it means to build a life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Marcus. At the time of this story, I was 34 years old, working as a software project manager at a mid-sized tech firm in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. I grew up lower middle class. My mom, Gloria, raised me mostly alone after my dad passed when I was 16. We never went hungry, but I knew what it felt like to hear your mother whisper on the phone with the electric company asking for one more week. I knew what it felt like to wear shoes with cardboard tucked inside to cover the holes. So when I grew up, I made myself a promise. I would never feel that kind of uncertainty again, and nobody in my family ever would either. I met Denise in college. She was an art education major. I was in computer science. We met at a campus coffee shop when she spilled an entire iced latte on my laptop bag. She was mortified. I was annoyed. She offered to buy me a new bag. I said she could buy me dinner instead. That was 10 years ago. We got married when I was 26. She was 24. We rented a small apartment for 2 years while I saved aggressively. I'm talking packed lunches every day, no vacations, no new furniture, nothing that didn't serve the plan. The plan was the house. And 6 years into our marriage, we got it. 4 bedrooms, good school district, big kitchen with the island Denise always dreamed about, backyard with enough space for a swing set eventually, a 2-car garage, a home office for me. That home office was my favorite room, not because of the desk or the chair or the window that looked out onto the maple tree in the side yard, because of the whiteboard. I had a massive whiteboard mounted on the wall, and on it I tracked everything: mortgage payoff target date, college fund projections for our daughter Maya, who had just been born the year before, retirement timeline, monthly net worth tracker, emergency fund balance, credit scores for both of us updated quarterly. Every Sunday night after dinner, I would go into that office, close the door, and update the board, erase old numbers, write new ones, recalculate, adjust. I called it my scoreboard. I thought I was winning. Denise never complained about the whiteboard. She never told me to stop, but looking back now, there were signs I completely ignored. She would peek into the office sometimes on Sunday nights and ask if I wanted to watch a movie with her. I'd say, yeah, just give me 20 minutes. 20 minutes would become an hour. By the time I came out, she was usually asleep on the couch. She would ask if we could skip the financial review one week and take Maya to the farmer's market on Sunday morning instead. I would say we could do both. We never did both. One time she asked me a question that I replay in my head more than almost anything else from that period of our lives. We were sitting at the dinner table. Maya was in her high chair mashing sweet potatoes into her hair. Denise was watching her with this soft look on her face. Then she turned to me and said, "Do you ever feel like we're building a life but not actually living one?" I remember exactly what I said. I said, "Babe, once we're 6 months ahead on the mortgage, we can relax a little." She nodded. She picked up the plates. She didn't bring it up again. I thought that meant she agreed. She didn't agree. She just stopped asking. Around the time Maya turned 1, Denise started doing something I thought was sweet but ultimately pointless. She started a memory box. It was this wooden box, maybe 10 inches long, hand-painted with little flowers on the lid. I think she bought it at a craft fair. And she started filling it with things. Maya's hospital bracelet from the day she was born, a tiny bag with a lock of hair from her first haircut, her first pair of shoes, these impossibly small white sneakers that looked like they were made for a doll, a dried flower from the bouquet I gave Denise the day we brought Maya home, and letters. Denise wrote Maya a letter every month, just a few paragraphs on plain stationery about what Maya did that month, what made her laugh, what new sound she was making, what the weather was like, what song Denise was singing to her at bedtime. She would sit at the kitchen table after Maya went to sleep and write in this beautiful looping handwriting of hers. Sometimes she would cry a little while she wrote, not sad crying, the kind of crying that happens when you feel something too big for your chest to hold. I would walk by on my way to the office and see her writing. I would say something like, "That's sweet, babe," and keep walking. I never once asked to read one. There was one evening I came home from work and Denise was on the living room floor with Maya. They were finger painting, and I don't mean neat little dabs on paper. I mean full contact chaos. There was paint on the newspaper Denise had spread out, there was paint on Maya's face, there was paint on Denise's jeans, and there was paint on the hardwood floor. The hardwood floor we had just refinished 3 months earlier. My first thought was not, "Look at my girls having fun." My first thought was, "That's going to stain." I didn't say it out loud, but Denise saw my face, and something in her expression dimmed just slightly, like a candle when someone walks by too fast. She said, "We'll clean it up. Come paint with us." I said, "Let me just check something real quick first." I went to the office, I opened my spreadsheet, and never came back to paint. Later that week, Denise took one of Maya's handprint paintings and framed it. She hung it in the hallway near the front door. It was bright red and messy and had tiny fingerprints smudged across it. I thought it clashed with the decor. I actually thought that. My 14-month-old daughter pressed her hand into paint and left her mark on a piece of paper, and I looked at it and thought about the aesthetic of our hallway. I didn't say anything, but I didn't tell her I loved it either. That painting would become one of the most important objects in my life, but that night it was just something on the wall I thought didn't match. Tuesday, October 14th, 2:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock on my nightstand when the pounding started. At first I thought I was dreaming. The sound was so loud and so frantic that my brain couldn't process it as real. Then Denise sat up beside me and said, "Someone's at the door." I got up, half asleep, annoyed honestly. I walked down the hallway toward the front door, and that's when I smelled it. You hear people describe the smell of a house fire, and you think you understand. You don't. It's not like a campfire. It's not like burnt food. It's chemical. It's thick. It gets into your throat before it gets into your lungs, and your body knows before your brain does that something is deeply wrong. I opened the front door, and Mrs. Alvarado was standing there in her bathrobe. She's 70 years old, lives next door, feeds our cat when we travel. She was shaking. She pointed toward the back of our house and said, "Marcus, there's fire coming from your garage. I already called." I turned around and I could see it, the glow coming from the back hallway near the garage entrance, orange light flickering under the door like something alive was trying to get through. Everything after that happened in what felt like both 10 seconds and 10 hours simultaneously. I ran to Maya's nursery. She was awake, crying. The smoke hadn't reached her room yet, but the sound had woken her. I grabbed her out of the crib, wrapped her in the blanket she was lying on, and held her against my chest. I yelled for Denise. I could hear her moving in our bedroom. I yelled again, "Denise, we have to go now!" I ran to the front door with Maya. Mrs. Alvarado was on the lawn on the phone with 911 again. I handed Maya to her. Maya was screaming. Mrs. Alvarado held her tight and said, "I've got her. Go get Denise." I turned to go back inside, and that's when I saw Denise come through the front door. She was coughing, her suit was on her face, her eyes were watering, her hair was pulled back in the messy bun she always slept in. And she was holding the box
the wooden box with the painted flowers on the lid. She had gone the opposite direction from the front door, not toward safety. She had gone to the living room bookshelf where she kept the memory box, and she had grabbed it and then come back through the thickening smoke to the front door. I stood there on the lawn, holding nothing, and she stood there holding everything that mattered to her, and I didn't understand yet. I was too panicked, too flooded with adrenaline. The fire department arrived within 8 minutes, but 8 minutes is a lifetime when your house is burning. We stood across the street, me holding Maya, who had finally stopped screaming and was just whimpering into my neck, Denise beside me, arms wrapped around that box, watching the flames eat through the roof. Our neighbors came out. Someone brought us water. Someone brought a blanket. Someone asked if we needed anything. I couldn't answer. I just stood there watching 6 years of my life
collapse into itself. The garage was where it started. Electrical fault in the wiring behind the panel. It spread to the back bedrooms, the kitchen, and eventually the roof. By the time they got it under control, roughly 70% of the house was destroyed. The structure was a total loss. We sat on Mrs. Alvarado's porch until the sun came up. Maya fell asleep in my arms. Denise sat next to me with the box on her lap. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The fire chief, a man named Daniels with kind eyes and soot-streaked gear, came over around 5 a.m. and told us the official assessment. The house couldn't be saved. Insurance would need to process the claim. He gave us a card for the Red Cross and said they could help with temporary housing. Then he looked at Denise and the box on her lap. "Most people grab phones or wallets," he said. "What's in the box?" Denise looked down at it and said quietly, "My daughter's first year." Chief Daniels nodded slowly. He said, "Then you grabbed the right thing." I stood there behind them and felt something I couldn't name. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was the beginning of the realization that my wife understood something I had completely missed. The Red Cross arranged a motel for us about 15 minutes from our neighborhood. 2 double beds, a mini fridge, a bathroom that smelled like industrial cleaner, a window that faced the parking lot. 14 months earlier, I had been updating my whiteboard to celebrate that our net worth had crossed a number I'd been chasing for 3 years. Now, I was sitting on a motel bedspread watching my daughter sleep between 2 pillows I didn't own. My brain did what it was trained to do. I went into project management mode. Within 24 hours, I had filed the initial insurance claim, called the bank about the mortgage, contacted my job to arrange emergency leave, started a spreadsheet on my phone listing every item we had lost and its estimated replacement value. I sat on that motel bed at 2 in the morning while Denise and Maya slept, and I typed line after line into my phone. Living room couch, $1,200. Kitchen table and chairs, $800. Television, $650. Desktop computer, $1,400. Maya's crib, $350. Clothing, estimated $2,000 total. Financial documents in the safe, irreplaceable but replaceable through agencies. I typed for 2 hours. The list was over 140 items long. I totaled it up. I cross-referenced it with what our insurance might cover. I identified gaps. I made a plan. At some point, I looked over and saw Denise. She was sitting on the floor between the 2 beds with her back against the nightstand. The box was open in her lap. She was holding one of the letters she had written to Maya. The paper was slightly crinkled from the humidity and the smoke, but the ink was intact. She was reading it silently. Her lips were moving. There were tears on her cheeks, but her expression was almost peaceful. I watched her, and I heard the words in my head before I could stop them. She saved a box of paper and baby shoes, while the safe with our passports, the deed copy, and $8,000 in emergency cash burned. I'm not proud of that thought, but I need you to understand where my head was at the time. I was terrified. I was calculating. I was in survival mode. And in survival mode, I measured everything by its replacement cost. And in that equation, a box of letters and hospital bracelets scored 0. I was wrong, but I didn't know it yet. I went back to my spreadsheet.
Denise finished the letter, folded it carefully, put it back in the box, and closed the lid. She climbed into bed with Maya between us and put her hand on my arm. "Come to sleep," she said. "In a minute," I said. She left her hand there for a while, then she pulled it back and closed her eyes. After 4 days in the motel, we moved to my mother Gloria's house, about 2 hours north. She had a spare bedroom and she cleared out her sewing room to make a space for Maya's temporary crib. Gloria is the kind of woman who shows love through food and silence. She doesn't give speeches. She makes you a plate and sits with you while you eat it and waits until you're ready to talk. For the first week, she didn't ask us much. She just held Maya, cooked for us, and let us process. But I wasn't processing. I was working. I was on the phone with the insurance adjuster constantly. The claim was complicated. There were questions about the wiring, about whether the previous owner had disclosed a known issue, about the specific coverage limits for certain categories of property. Every call was an argument. Every email was a dead end. Every day the rebuilding felt further away. I was short-tempered. I wasn't sleeping. I was eating Gloria's food but not tasting it. I was in the same room as Denise and Maya, but I was somewhere else entirely. I was in the spreadsheet. I was in the claim. I was in the numbers. One evening, I got off a particularly brutal call with the adjuster. They were disputing the value of several items, and it was going to delay the payout by at least another month. I hung up and threw my phone on the kitchen counter. Denise was sitting at the table feeding Maya. The memory box was on the counter nearby. Denise had taken to keeping it close, almost like a security blanket. And I said it. I looked at that box, and I looked at Denise, and I said, "You know, if you had grabbed the safe instead of that box, we would have our passports, the deed copy, and $8,000 in cash right now. This whole process would be half as complicated." The room got very still. Even Maya stopped babbling like babies sometimes do when they sense something shift in the air. Denise put the spoon down. She wiped Maya's mouth with a cloth. She looked at me, and she didn't yell. She didn't cry. Her voice was steady and quiet, and that made it hit harder than any shout could have. She said, "The house is gone, Marcus. The money will come back. We'll get new passports. We'll get a new deed copy. But if I had lost what's in that box, no amount of money would bring it back. I need you to understand that." She stood up, she picked up Maya, she walked out of the kitchen and went to the bedroom and closed the door softly. I stood there. I stood there in my mother's kitchen, and I felt the silence fill the room like water filling a sinking boat. Then I heard Gloria. She had been in the next room. She heard everything. She came in slowly, dish towel over her shoulder, and she sat down at the kitchen table. She didn't look angry. She looked like someone watching her son make the same mistake she had hoped he wouldn't. She was quiet for a minute. Then she said, "Your father kept every report card you ever brought home. Did you know that?" I shook my head. Every single one. From 1st grade to 12th, he kept them in a cigar box in his dresser. After he died, I found them. They were organized by year, and on the back of each one he had written a note. Little things like, "Marcus got an A in math today. Proud of my boy." Or, "Marcus struggled in English this semester, but he didn't give up. That's my son." She paused. "He didn't save receipts, Marcus. He didn't save bank statements. He saved you." I put my hands on the counter and I let my head drop and I cried. I cried in a way I hadn't cried since my father's funeral 18 years earlier. The kind of crying where your whole body participates and your breathing turns into something unrecognizable and you grip whatever is in front of you because it feels like the ground is moving. Gloria didn't say anything else. She just put her hand on my back and stood there. And in that kitchen, at that counter, something broke inside me. But it was the kind of breaking that lets light in. I didn't go to Denise that night. I needed to sit with what Gloria said. I needed to stop calculating and start feeling, and for someone who had spent a decade living inside spreadsheets, that was like asking me to breathe underwater. The next morning, I woke up early. Denise was feeding Maya in the kitchen. Gloria had gone to the store, deliberately, I think, to give us space. I sat down across from Denise, and I didn't open with a plan. I didn't open with a strategy or a timeline or a number. For maybe the first time in our marriage, I opened with the truth. I said, "You asked me once if we felt like we were building a life but not living one." I remember that. I didn't answer it honestly then, but the answer is yes. I've been so afraid of going back to where I started that I turned our family into a project. I tracked us like a portfolio. I measured us like an investment. And somewhere in all that measuring, I stopped seeing the things that actually matter. I took a breath. That box you saved? You were right. You were right about all of it. The letters, the shoes, the handprint. That stuff is our life. Not the mortgage payoff date, not the net worth number. Our life is Maya smashing sweet potatoes in her hair and you painting on the floor, and those letters you write that I never once asked to read. My voice broke on that last part. I never once asked to read them, Denise. You wrote our daughter a letter every month for over a year, and I never asked to see a single one. Denise was crying, quietly, the way she does, just tears sliding without any sound. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I don't need you to stop caring about our future," she said. "I just need you to stop missing our present." We sat there for a long time. Maya threw a piece of banana on the floor and laughed. We both laughed too, and it was the first time in weeks that the air in the room felt breathable. Over the next few weeks, the insurance claims started moving. The payout came through. It wasn't everything we hoped for, but it was enough to make a decision about what came next. And here is where the old Marcus and the new Marcus diverged. The old Marcus would have rebuilt the same house, 4 bedrooms, home office, whiteboard back on the wall, same plan, same scoreboard, same game. Instead, I sat down with Denise and said something that surprised both of us. "What if we go smaller?" She looked at me like I had spoken a foreign language. 3 bedrooms instead of 4, I said. No home office, bigger living room, and that craft space you've always wanted, a place where you and Maya can paint and make things and I won't care about the floors. Denise stared at me. "What about your whiteboard?" she asked. And I said, "I think I've been keeping score in the wrong game." We found a place, a 3-bedroom house about 10 minutes from our old neighborhood. Smaller lot, simpler layout, but it had a big open living area and a sunlit room off the kitchen that was perfect for Denise's art supplies and Maya's future projects. During the renovation, I did something I had never done in my entire career. I took 2 full weeks off work, not to manage the rebuild, not to negotiate with contractors, to be home. I was there when Maya took her first steps without holding on to anything. Right there in Gloria's living room, 3 wobbly steps from the coffee table to my knees. I caught her. I was there. Denise and I started a new tradition. Every month we would sit together after Maya went to bed and write her a letter. Together. My handwriting next to Denise's. My observations next to hers. My voice and her voice on the same page, telling our daughter about her life. The first one we wrote together started like this. "Dear Maya, this month your mom and dad learned something important. We learned that a house is just walls and a roof, but a home is the people inside it and the memories they choose to keep. You taught us that. You and a wooden box and a red handprint. We love you, Mom and Dad." On moving day, I carried 2 things into the new house first, Maya in my right arm and the box in my left. Denise watched from the doorway, and I saw her smile in a way I hadn't seen in longer than I want to admit. It was the smile of someone who finally felt seen. I built a shelf in the living room, eye level, right where you'd see it when you walked in the front door. The memory box sits there. It's bigger now, overflowing actually. Denise had to start a second one. And on the wall above the shelf, I hung something, the fingerprint handprint.
The original one, the messy red one from the night on the living room floor, the one I thought clashed with the decor. It's the first thing you see when you enter our home. Time jump. 3 years after the fire. Maya is 4.5 now. She has Denise's eyes and my stubbornness, and an opinion about everything, including but not limited to which cup she drinks her juice from, which shoes are acceptable for school, and why broccoli is suspicious. Our Sunday routine is different now. Morning, pancakes. Maya helps, and by helps, I mean she pours approximately 1 cup of batter onto the griddle and 3 cups onto the counter. We let her. Afternoon, we do something together. Park, library, baking, painting. Sometimes we just lie on the living room floor and Maya tells us stories about her imaginary friend who is apparently a dragon named Kenneth. Evening, I check in on our finances. 30 minutes. I review the budget, check the savings, make sure we're on track. Then I close the laptop and I'm done. I still have goals. I still track our savings. I'm not financially reckless. The fear I grew up with didn't disappear, but it doesn't drive the car anymore. It rides in the back seat. The whiteboard is gone. It's never coming back. Pause. One evening a few weeks ago, Maya was doing her bedtime routine. Teeth brushed, pajamas on, 1 book, that's the rule, although she always negotiates for 2. On the way to her room, she stopped in the hallway and pointed at the framed handprint painting on the wall. "Daddy, what's that?" she asked. I knelt down next to her. "That's your handprint," I said, "from when you were a baby." She looked at it and then looked at her own hand and spread her fingers wide, comparing. "It's so tiny," she said. I looked at it. This messy red smudge on a piece of paper that survived a fire because my wife knew what mattered more than I did. "Yeah," I said, "but it's the biggest thing in this house." Maya gave me a confused look because she's 4, and that didn't make literal sense. She shrugged and went to pick out her book. But Denise was standing at the end of the hallway. She heard me, and she leaned against the wall and pressed her hand against her chest, and I could see, even from where I was kneeling, that her eyes were full. She knew what I meant. Pause. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I did something I now do every month. I sat at the kitchen table and opened a small notebook. It's nothing fancy, plain black cover, college-ruled pages. But in it, I write letters to Maya. Just me, my voice, my handwriting, next to the ones Denise and I write together. I picked up my pen and I wrote the most recent one. Reading slowly, with weight. Dear Maya, today you said your first full sentence at dinner. You looked right at me and said, "Daddy, can I have more, please?" And I almost missed it because I was checking my phone. But I didn't miss it. I heard your voice. I put the phone down and I looked at you and said, "Yes, you can, baby." I'm going to keep hearing you. I'm going to keep seeing you. I'm going to keep showing up for the things that don't fit on a spreadsheet, because those are the things that matter. The tiny handprints, the messy paintings, the banana on the floor, the letters in the box. That's the real scoreboard. And your mom knew that all along. Love, Dad. I closed the notebook. I put it on the shelf next to the memory box, and I turned off the kitchen light and walked to bed. On the way down the hallway, I passed the handprint on the wall. I stopped. I looked at it. I used to think building a life meant hitting numbers, checking boxes, outrunning the poverty I grew up in. I thought if I could just get the house and the savings and the plan right, then I would feel safe. Then I would feel successful. Then I would feel like enough. But enough was never a number. Enough was my wife on a living room floor covered in paint. Enough was a wooden box full of letters no one else would think to save. Enough was a 4-year-old asking for more pancakes, a dragon named Kenneth, and tiny shoes that fit in the palm of my hand. Enough was always right in front of me. I just had to stop counting long enough to see it.
We lost everything in the fire. But what my wife grabbed taught me what everything actually was. If this story moved you, I'd appreciate it if you hit subscribe. I share stories like this every week. Stories about the moments that change us, the people who see what we miss, and the things that matter more than we realize. I'll see you in the next one.